All right, so what are some areas, contemporary issues, in which an ethical perspective is helpful for understanding or weighing in on healthcare? Well, we've identified in the textbook 5 different areas. So first, healthcare. Is healthcare a right or a commodity? Now, the textbook does not use the language of positive and negative rights, but the distinction is made, and you might find these labels helpful. Virtually no one denies the existence of a negative right to healthcare. Those who wish to purchase healthcare, for example, are permitted to do so on nearly all accounts. I think with the Obamacare ruling, that it took out the pre-existing conditions, which prevented some people from being able to purchase healthcare. This was a major issue for me and my wife 9 years ago when I left my job in the financial sector to go back to school. One thing I didn't realize is that by leaving my job and by starting as a graduate student with a wife who was 7 months pregnant, is that my new insurance company would not allow my wife to come onto their insurance because she was seven months pregnant. That made it that was a very challenging few months at an already challenging, stressful period of our lives. And so because of those rulings, my wife had to go on state insurance in order to have the baby. And so, yes, so clearly this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. And I, for one, on a personal level, was very happy when President Obama removed that pre-existing conditions loophole. Now, when we look at healthcare, the real controversy is over whether we have a positive right to healthcare. And by that we mean, is there any sense in which society as a whole owes it to its members to provide some basic level of Medicare? Right? Is that something that society weighs in on? Society already provides some basic level of guarantees to its citizens. Right? If you're unable to get a job, the government jumps in and pays like some unemployment. If you are disabled or have sick children, right, the government jumps in and helps cover some of those basic level of medical costs or provide some income or assistance. But is this something that everyone is entitled to? Or is this something that it really depends on your ability to pay? That if you have more money or willing to pay more money, that you should get better types of service or better coverage than those without. Second, stem cell research. Near the end in the chapter, in table 9-1, we'll see embryonic stem cell research is distinguished from adult stem cell research. Let me note here that there is virtually no ethical controversy concerning the latter. The controversy over the former stems from the fact that embryos must be destroyed in order for their stem cells to be put to use. So why is this so problematic? Well, because this is the destruction of an embryo, and many people argue, as we did earlier in this term, that an embryo represents life, and at what stage does an embryo become a representative or a smaller form of a human life? So at what point is this considered or classified as murder? Now, it also is worthwhile to note that some of the different ways in which embryonic stem cells are acquired. There are 2 main options. First are called leftover embryos from IVF. So like when a couple has implanted as many of their embryos as they wish. And the second is called somatic cell nuclear transfer, or cloning. Now, some people believe that there is a morally significant difference between using stem cells from an extant embryo, which will never develop further, on the one hand, and creating a human organism solely for the purpose of destroying it on the other. All right, third, we're looking at genetic engineering. The textbook does not make this distinction explicit, but many people believe that it is crucial to make a distinction between genetic therapy and genetic enhancement. Others might believe that this distinction is meaningless, and this is one of the topics that we'll be writing about this week. Human reproductive cloning is also mentioned in this context, although it does not involve the alteration of a genetic code. In many cases, there are the sci-fi worries that exist. So, for example, it is conceivable that individuals might clone themselves in order to have access to organs that are a perfect genetic match. So some of you might be familiar with the movie The Island, in which that was a basic plot point. More recently, Netflix has created the show called Altered Carbon, which allows for a multiplicity of human lives, and in a way the free killing of them. They're called sleeves, bodies, but what really matters is the spirit of or the essence of a person, which is transferable between bodies. Right. So this world of genetic engineering and genetic therapy is very fascinating and will be the source of a lot of ethical discussion in the future. If I had the choice, and I could control for my children whether or not they would have a disease like Parkinson's, well, then that's a no-brainer. Of course, I would want to limit that for my children. I want what's best for them. I want them to have to be happy. But could not that same argument be made for enhancing my children's intellect genetically? And so this is a very slippery slope between controlling for quality of life and eliminating genetic deterrents, and second, enhancing one's genetic traits. And so one of the questions that I'm asking you to contemplate is, should this be something that we allow? Should we allow for parents to control for their children's eye color or height or weight? Should we allow parents to control for their children's physical dimensions or their intellect? Should we allow parents to control for things like eyesight or inherited diseases? And where do you draw the line between enhancing the quality of one's life? If you argue that a child should not be born with a disease like Parkinson's, then why should a child be born with degenerative eyes or a degenerative brain? Why not control for things like intellect? But then what happens in the future when in American society, which for some reason still strongly believes that access to this type of medical equipment or treatment should be left largely to class one's ability to pay? What happens when the wealthy class are the ones who are the only ones able to afford controlling for their offspring genetics? So it's only the wealthy who have the money to be able to create the perfect species in their children. Does this then not create a system of haves and have-nots, similar to like the movie Gattaca, or more recently Elysium, in which the wealthy live forever and the poor live on Earth in pollution and war, and we get to look out into space and see our neighboring Elysium planet with all of its rich, beautiful people. So genetic engineering, fascinating topic. I'm going to jump down to transplants. Right now, the sale of bodily organs is illegal in the United States. But the reasons for this prohibition are not entirely clear. This is another topic that we'll be discussing this week. Should people be able to sell their own body parts? I would like for you to consider the ethical dilemmas that this could bring up. On one hand, I have 2 kidneys, one of which I probably will never really need. And I could really use $40,000 right now. And so if somebody who was experiencing kidney failure was willing to pay me $40,000 for a kidney, okay, sure. I think I could do that trade. That would make my life better right now, and it would make their life better, a win-win. How is this a negative? Where is the harm in allowing for the sale of organs? Well, the harm comes when we look into the future and contemplate how people could take advantage of this. So, for instance, what class of people will be most likely to be selling their body parts for money? Right, the people who are in most need of money. So this is the poor, the destitute. These are like single mothers or single fathers. And so does this not prey then on the most innocent and downtrodden in our society? Does this not also create a marketplace for the illegal harvesting of body parts? Right. So imagine a horror film in which there's a hitchhiker, a homeless person who is kidnapped, who's not ever met, and his or her body is sold for parts because there is this massive financial market for selling in kidneys. Right, and so I'm not saying that it would necessarily happen, and there will certainly be steps to control for that, but this is where the real issues come, is that it creates a slippery slope, and we do not know what future impact our immediate decisions could have.